I didn't figure it out because I was smart. I figured it out because I finally got tired of feeling crazy. If you've ever stared at someone you love and heard a voice in your head whisper, "Something's wrong," you know the feeling. For me, that someone was my wife, Jenna. The voice started small. A missed call here, a weird laugh there, a slip about where she had dinner with friends. It grew teeth when those little details started biting each other, refusing to fit. And it didn't shut up until it ate through my denial, and I stared at a truth I still have trouble naming out loud. My brother, Caleb, slept with my wife behind my back for years. They thought I'd never catch them. They were almost right. I used to think brother was a word that guaranteed loyalty. It used to taste like dirt and summer on my tongue, like the tractor ruts we jumped at our grandparents' farm in Oklahoma before our folks moved us to Colorado. Caleb had a way of finding fun or trouble before the rest of us even realized it existed. He could talk a dog off a meat truck, as Dad liked to say with pride and a little warning. I was the steady one, the rule follower, the guy who never missed a practice or a shift and who learned how to fix more things than I broke. He was 2 years younger, taller by an inch, charming in a way that made teachers forgive undone homework and girls forgive everything else. He'd grin, mouth tilted, like even he couldn't believe he got away with it again. I loved him. He broke my stuff and I covered for him when he snuck back in past curfew. I took the fall when Mom found the dent in the fender from the mailbox he'd clipped. I was the one who kept my mouth shut when he dated my ex 2 weeks after we split, telling myself we were kids and it didn't matter. I wrote it all off as low-stakes chaos, as if that's the only kind he was capable of. When I met Jenna, I thought I'd finally outrun chaos. She worked the morning shift at the coffee place around the corner from my job site. And the first thing I noticed was that her smile wasn't free. She charged herself for it. She didn't give it away unless you'd earned it. When she laughed, the sound came all the way from the middle of her chest, like she'd weighed it before releasing it. And once she did, she didn't regret it. I'd show up in my drywall dust and steel-toe boots, and she'd still ask about my day like it mattered. She said she liked how quiet I was. I told her quiet didn't mean empty. She said she knew. We dated through cheap tacos and late-night hardware store runs and Sunday hikes that left my calves burning and my heart wide open. We got married in a park with mountains in the distance, and my mom crying into a handkerchief that had been her mother's. Caleb held the rings. He made a toast so funny even the priest snorted. He hugged me after and said, "You did good, big bro." You want me to tell you the first red flag? I can't. Not because there wasn't one, but because they were all small enough to pass as wind. It's funny how a gust can knock you flat if you're already standing on the edge of a cliff. There was the night of the winter storm when Jenna said her tire blew on I-25, and Caleb happened to be the one who rescued her because I was on a job 2 hours south in Pueblo. She said she called the Bayre, but Caleb got there first. I thanked him, bought him a beer. He winked and told us he'd saved the day. I laughed. She laughed. We all laughed. There was the time my mom asked, casually, if Jenna had mentioned running into Caleb at the new brewery near Coors Field. Small world, Mom said, stirring her iced tea. Jenna blinked and said, "Oh yeah. Totally random." Later, when I said I didn't know Caleb liked that place, Jenna said, "He's so social. He likes everywhere." I remember that line, not because it was clever, but because it wasn't. It was a filler sentence. If you're paying attention, filler sentences are road flares. There was the baby talk that never went anywhere. We tried for a while, more than a while if you ask my family. And the doctor's blood work said everything was normal, but, these things can take time. Sometimes Jenna would cry and tell me she felt broken, Other times she'd shrug like it was a blessing in disguise because she wasn't sure she wanted to spend the next decade waking up at 3 a.m. I said, we didn't have to do anything we didn't both want. She said I was too good to her and kissed my cheek like it was a small apology for a big fact she wasn't ready to say out loud. And always, woven into the background like a thread you think is part of the pattern until the whole sweater unravels. Caleb. He'd show up with takeout when I worked late, just to check in. He'd text Jenna memes and she'd roll her eyes and show them to me. He'd ask her opinion about a girl he was dating and she'd give it. Like a friend would, like a sister-in-law might. Like a woman whose phone history I should have asked to see and didn't. Here's where I risk sounding like a cliché. I didn't look because I trusted them. And I trusted them because I wanted to be the kind of man who could. I wanted to be the kind of husband and brother who didn't measure love with suspicion. Suspicion steals, and I didn't want to be a thief. What finally changed wasn't a smoking gun. It was a hoodie. We have a golden retriever named Moose who thinks the world is a series of things to proudly deliver to you. Socks, shoes, a squeaky toy you hid under the couch because the sound made you consider moving to a monastery. If you ignore him long enough, he ups the stakes. One Saturday in late fall, I was fixing the fence gate in the backyard, and Jenna was at yoga. Moose came tearing out of our bedroom with a gray hoodie in his mouth. He pranced like he'd just caught a rabbit, tail banging the walls. "Drop it," I said, laughing, because he looked ridiculous. He dropped it. I bent down, picked it up, and in the same motion saw the tag with a felt-tip scrawl from a party I'd forgotten. Caleb. The memory arrived fully formed. Family cornhole tournament at the 4th of July barbecue. Caleb leaves his hoodie on the back of a chair. It gets tossed in our trunk with the folding tables. I'd never taken it back to him, except I had, because I remember handing it to him a week later in the driveway. "Thought you'd miss this?" He'd said, "My hero." We laughed. I stood in the hallway holding a hoodie I'd already returned to its owner. Moose sat, tongue out, pleased with himself. I put the hoodie to my nose, and it smelled like detergent and a sweet note I knew as my wife's shampoo and something else I didn't name, because naming it would mean it was real. That night, Jenna came home with a smoothie and a yoga mat and a flush on her cheeks. I held up the hoodie and asked, without heat, "You seen this?" She didn't miss a beat. "Oh, Caleb must have left it when he stopped by to drop off those tickets on Wednesday." "Tickets?" I said, even though I remembered now that Caleb had offered us Nuggets tickets and I'd said I couldn't make it. Job site inspection. I let the hoodie answer my question with silence. I put it back in the laundry room. I didn't accuse her. I brushed Moose and grilled chicken and told her about the guy at work who thought a stud finder was something you used on Tinder. That's the thing about living in a slow-motion car wreck. You learn to narrate the banal because the alternative is screaming. When I couldn't sleep, I started checking our Ring camera history. Not because I expected to find anything obvious. I thought it might restore my sense that I was imagining things. The night with the blown tire, the brewery, the hoodie, the voice. I scrolled through doorbell alerts like a gambler convinced the next hand would make it all make sense. That's when I noticed the gaps. I'm not talking about hours we never recorded because the sensitivity was too low or a leaf tripped it, and I turned notifications off. I'm talking about blocks of time, little ones at first, where history didn't exist. Deleted. I went to settings, checked users. Primary, me. Shared, Jenna. Okay, I clicked through the log and saw deleted video with timestamps I didn't recognize as anything except erasure. I tried to restore them. Not possible. I told myself she probably deleted the one where she came home in a ratty t-shirt because she hates being on camera in ratty t-shirts. I told myself a story you could drive a truck through because I needed a narrative big enough to haul my denial. The next morning, I bought an extra Ring camera and a pack of AA batteries at Home Depot under the pretext of wanting a better angle on the backyard. I installed it under the eave that looked down on the side gate next to our bedroom window, the place you'd cut through to the alley if you wanted to avoid the front porch. I synced it only to my account and named it Backyard Lights. It sent footage to a cloud Jenna didn't have access to. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself paranoid was better than stupid. For 2 weeks, nothing happened except evidence that raccoons hate me. Then, one Tuesday at 10:43 p.m., while Jenna was at drinks with Megan, my phone vibrated on the nightstand. Motion detected. Backyard lights. I opened it and saw a figure slip past the camera and into the side gate. Tall, hoodie up, shoulders I knew not because I'd studied them, but because I'd grown up racing them. The camera caught a face for a half second when he glanced back to see if the latch caught. Caleb. A sound came out of me I hoped to never hear again. It wasn't loud. It was the opposite of loud. It was what happens when a dam doesn't crack. It dissolves. My chest felt like the bottom had been scooped out with a dull spoon. I watched Caleb walk to our bedroom window, which Jenna had cracked on warmer nights since the AC acted up, and tap on the glass. I watched the curtains part. I watched my wife lift the screen from the inside with casual practice, then reach for his hand like this had been their choreography for months. Years. I didn't storm out into the yard. I didn't call the cops or my mom or the hotel where I should have gone when I first felt that voice chewing my rib cage. I lay there and watched until there was nothing left to watch. And then I stood up and brushed my teeth because it was what my body knew how to do when it didn't know how to do anything else. I put on my boots. I grabbed my keys. I drove to a 24-hour diner off Federal and sat in a booth while a waitress with a name tag that said Darlene topped off my coffee and asked if I was okay in a voice that meant she already knew the answer. I stayed there until 3, when the footage showed him slipping back out, hood up, the screen sliding into place like a secret putting itself back together. If you're wondering why I didn't blow it all up right then, you're asking a fair question. The answer is that blowing it up in the middle of the night is satisfying, but messy. I didn't want a scene. I wanted the truth to nail itself to the wall so hard no one could ever pry it free. I wanted it on record, in color, under oath if necessary. I wanted to know how long. I wanted to know if I was crazy or if I'd been trained to be polite in the face of a fire. I bought 2 more cameras and a GPS tag the next day. The cameras were for the garage and the alley, placed so that the path from Caleb's apartment 3 blocks away, something I realized with a flare of stupidity had been one of the reasons he stopped by so often, was covered from 3 angles. The tag was a little white disc that stuck perfectly inside the lining of Caleb's beloved Rocky's snapback, which he left on our counter so often it might as well have had a forwarding address. People talk about AirTags like they're for lost luggage and stolen bikes. Turns out they're also good at locating conscience-free relatives. That Friday, I told Jenna I was heading to a job site early and wouldn't be back until late. She kissed me and said she'd have wine with the girls, maybe crash at Megan's. I said have fun and text me if you need a ride. She said I was sweet. She said, I love you like a period at the end of a sentence about weather. I parked 2 blocks over and waited. The sun slid behind the mountains in that sudden Colorado way that makes you forget it's autumn until your hands go numb. I watched the little dot on my phone that represented my brother's hat move across the map like a beetle. Alley, fence, side gate. The cameras dutifully recorded. He knocked. Screen up. In. Curtain closed. My heart beat so hard, my vision went white at the edges. I drove to my mom's house. I didn't choose her because I wanted to break her heart at dinner. I chose her because if I went home, I might do something that would make the legal part of this story a lot more complicated. And because if anyone was going to tell me I was about to take a path I couldn't unwalk, it was the woman who taught me to stand up straight even when it hurts. She opened the door in her slippers, saw my face, and said, "Come in." I sat at her kitchen table and showed her the footage. I watched the light go out in her eyes in stuttering increments as if the power were failing one circuit at a time. She didn't cry. She put her hand over her mouth like she was trying to keep words inside that would make the air toxic. When the videos ended, she stood. She put the kettle on. She took 2 mugs down. She moved like a person who knew that if she went still, that she might fall and never get back up. "Is there more?" she asked. "There doesn't need to be," I said. She nodded, the kind of nod you do at a funeral when someone says, "He's in a better place," and you say yes, so they'll stop talking. "How long?" "I don't know." I told her about the hoodie, the brewery, the deleted clips, the window screen that slid out like it had been rehearsed. "Long enough to plan where to put their hands," I said, and surprised myself with the meanness in my voice. She put her palm flat on the table like she was steadying the house. "What do you want to do?" "I want to not be this person," I said. "I want to go back and be stupid. I want to have never bought a camera. I want my life to be small and my problems to be mortgage payments and broken lawnmowers. I want to drag him out by the throat and throw her things on the lawn, and I want my dad to be alive so he can tell me whether to swing or not." Mom's mouth pressed into a line so tight it went colorless. "Your father would say, 'Don't you dare put your hands on anyone,'" she said. "And then he'd drive your brother to the police station himself." "For what?" I said. "There's no law against being a piece of—" I stopped because my mother has rules about language, and because the rest of that sentence wasn't going to fix anything. She brought the mugs over. We didn't drink. "You have to decide what kind of man you want to be in the worst moment of your life," she said. "Because that's the man you really are." "I don't know how to be anything right now." "Yes, you do," she said. "You've been practicing your whole life." She touched my knuckles where they were white on the ceramic. "You collect facts. You shore up your boundaries. You go to a lawyer before you go to war." I slept on her couch and dreamed of screens and hands and windows, and the way Caleb used to laugh when he beat me at horse. I woke up with my jaw clenched so hard it took 5 minutes before my teeth didn't ache. I found a lawyer on Monday. She was a woman named Rivera, with the kind of eyes that made me think she'd seen worse and stayed anyway. I told her what I had. She said, "Good, don't confront anyone yet." She explained the difference between rage and strategy, between stories you tell your friends and facts you hand a judge. She told me to keep recording. She told me to stop sleeping in the same bed as my wife. She told me to act like my house was a museum and every object was evidence. She told me to make copies. She told me to stop apologizing for being angry. I did all of that. And while I did, the little dots moved on my screen. The cameras clicked on and off. The window kept gliding in and out like a tongue tasting the air. People always want to know when I finally told them I knew. The truth is, I didn't. Not at first. I told everyone else. I told my boss I needed 2 days off for family stuff. He said, of course. I told my friend Aaron because he knows computers, and I wanted a backup of everything that couldn't be hacked. He said, "I'm so sorry, man." And then sat at my kitchen island and imaged my entire network like he was putting my house in a vault. I told my cousin Mia because she's a nurse and knows how to keep people breathing when they don't want to. She handed me a paper bag and told me to breathe into it if the claustrophobia took my lungs. She made me eat crackers. She told me to shower. She said, "You can do hard things." And the way she said it made it sound less like a motivational poster and more like a map. And then I told my mother again, this time with dates and times, and the news that Caleb had walked our father's old path right off a cliff, and that I was going to let him keep falling until he hit something that wasn't me. We scheduled a family dinner. If you're wincing at that, good. You have common sense. I didn't invite them to talk it out. I invited them to gather in a place where the truth couldn't be deleted. I chose Sunday because Jenna never missed Sunday dinner with my mom unless she was sick, and she hates being sick in front of other people. I chose 6:30 because I wanted it to be dark when it happened. There's something about darkness that makes the truth feel like light, even when it hurts your eyes. I didn't tell Caleb I was coming. Mom did. She made pot roast because it's his favorite and says, "I love you," in a language older than words. They showed up together, which felt like a joke God tells when he's run out of patience. Jenna carried a bottle of wine I knew was from the store near Caleb's place. Caleb hugged Mom and looked at me with that tilted grin that made it hard to breathe. "Hey, big bro," he said, the words so normal they sounded obscene. I hugged him back. I could smell my wife's perfume on his hoodie. We sat. We passed bread and bowls. We made small talk that wasn't small at all. Mom asked about work, and Jenna asked about the dog, and Caleb asked if I'd seen the game, and I said, yeah, wild ending, and I wanted to vomit. The thing about a bomb is you can't tell it to hurry. All you can do is sit there with the weight in your lap and decide when you're going to stand up. After Mom cleared plates and set down pie, I said, "I want to show you something." Jenna's fork paused on the way to her mouth. Caleb smiled like we were about to watch bloopers from a Christmas party. Mom folded her hands like a person at church trying to prepare for an answer to a question she didn't ask. I took out the tablet and opened the backyard lights folder. You know those videos where someone pulls a tablecloth and the plates stay in place? This was the opposite. The cloth stayed, everything else shattered. The first clip played with tinny audio. The side gate, the shadow, the face glanced back, the window, the hand. Jenna gasped like someone had pushed her underwater. Caleb went pale in a way I'd never seen on him, not even when he wrecked Dad's truck and thought he'd killed someone. Mom didn't move. I let the second clip play. The third, I clicked to the log that showed deletions from the front door account. I clicked to the timestamp that matched the night of the blown tire. I clicked to the GPS history that showed a hat that had traveled a route that had nothing to do with baseball. I didn't narrate. I didn't accuse. I let the archive do what my mouth couldn't. Caleb found his voice first. "Man," he started, then stopped, because even he couldn't sell whatever he was about to try. He looked at Mom. "It wasn't—" "Don't," she said, and it was the way she used to say it when we were kids about to push a joke into cruelty. Her voice didn't crack. Mine did, from not speaking. Jenna cried, not ugly sobs, silent, clean tears that looked like TV. "I can explain," she whispered. And the cliché almost made me laugh. Almost. "Don't," Mom said again. "No one is allowed to say, 'I can explain' in my house tonight." We sat in that swamp of quiet until the clock on the stove ticked loud enough to be a metronome for a life I no longer recognized. Caleb tried again, this time softer, a boy tugging a sleeve. "Bro." I felt my face go cold. "Don't bro me." My voice sounded foreign, like a recording of a man who hasn't slept. "How long?" Jenna looked at her hands. Caleb looked at the ceiling like the answer might be written there. Mom looked at me. "How long?" I asked again. And the second ask had more steel in it, the way a shovel hits rock after soft dirt. No poetry, no context, a number. 2 years, Jenna said. so quietly I almost didn't hear it. Caleb's head snapped toward her, surprised she'd betrayed the only thing left, the timeline. Sometimes on and off, she added, as if that made it friendlier. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for 2 years. It sounded like relief and grief had fused. 2 years, I repeated, tasting the number, finding it somehow both larger and smaller than I'd imagined. 2 years of holidays and sex and secrets and laughing at family jokes while our teeth had lies stuck between them. Why? Mom asked. And I loved her for asking it without apology. Like the word was a key and she was going to find the lock if it killed her. No one answered, which felt like the only honest thing they'd done in months. The rest of the scene is probably what you think. Admission in pieces, denial smashed under dates, half-muttered blame that died when it hit the air and turned ugly. Caleb said he didn't mean to hurt me. Jenna said it started when we were disconnected. They both said they didn't plan it. I said planning would almost be better because at least then you'd have to own your choices. I didn't shout. I didn't throw pie. I didn't go for the old easy phrases. Homewrecker, snake, witch, traitor. Even though they lined up in my throat like contestants in a pageant, I sat in the debris of my life at my mother's table and made a decision that would make the next year survivable. I filed for divorce this morning, I said. Jenna's head jerked up. You, what? With grounds, I added. There's a prenup. It's enforceable. You will not be living off me while you look for a new puzzle to take apart. My voice steadied with each word, like walking on a dock that finally hit land. I'm changing the locks tonight. You can pick up your things tomorrow with a police escort. I have a list of what's yours. It's fair. She stared at me like she was looking for a switch to flip back to the old version of me. We can fix this, she said. Because people think marriages are engines. Replace a part, top off a fluid. We can try counseling. We could have, I said. When it was a storm, we could stand under together. You built a second house in my backyard and managed the HOA with my brother. The bitterness came out sharp, and I didn't try to dull it. The only thing to fix is how quickly you get out. Caleb pushed back his chair. Man, you can't just... You will address me as Ethan, I said. And the way his name came out of my mouth made him stop moving. You will not speak to me without an attorney present. You will not step foot on my property again. If you contact my employer or my friends on my behalf, I will file a restraining order. If you set foot on Mom's porch when I am there, I will leave, and if you don't, I will call the police. Ethan? Mom said, but not in a way that asked me to soften. In a way that said she was here, still here, on a piece of a raft that could hold two. Caleb tried a third time, a failing salesman. We're family. You made us co-workers, I said. And I quit. He flinched. It landed. Maybe not in the place I wanted, but somewhere he'd feel when he lay down and closed his eyes. Jenna asked where she was supposed to go. I told her Megan would probably take her in, and if she didn't, her sister would. I told her she wasn't homeless. She was just out of my home. I told her I'd already set aside a box of her essentials, laptop, wallet, meds, a week of clothes, in the garage with the door code changed at midnight. I told her there would be a list. I told her lists are what keep the world from eating itself alive. At some point, their words blurred into the clink of forks and the hum of the fridge. At some point, Mom stood and put her hand on the back of my neck, the way she used to when I was sick as a kid. Like the body has a button you can press to keep it from shutting down. At some point, they left. At some point, I had a key duplicated for Mom and a locksmith scheduled for the morning. And then there was after. After is long. After is ordinary in the way that puts a new definition beside the old one and asks you to pick. After is a court calendar and settlement offers, my lawyer telling me to let them posture while she tightened the screws with a smile that was all teeth. After is my cousin Mia coming over with soup and my friend Aaron changing my Wi-Fi passwords and Moose curling up against my knees like a sandbag at the edge of a flood. People were kinder than I expected, except the ones who weren't, and both were educational. Some people had a scandal glow in their eyes, like Pain is a show they forgot they paid to see. Some people brought casseroles and didn't ask questions. My boss offered time off. I said work was the only thing that made sense. My crew let me swing a hammer until my arms hurt more than my chest. Jenna tried to fight the prenup until Rivera served her with the deleted video logs and the text messages we recovered when Aaron mirrored her phone to the cloud before she changed her password. She finally settled without a trial when Rivera made it clear we had enough to sink her claim for spousal support in front of the same judge whose son I'd coached in Little League. I didn't ask for blood. I asked for clean. We sold the car that had become a ferry between two houses. I kept the house. I refinanced and paid her a fair share of equity minus attorney fees, which are a beautiful karma the civilized world invented for when you want to set a dollar amount on consequences. Caleb called me once from an unknown number. I didn't answer. He texted from another. We should talk. I wrote back one sentence. We don't speak the same language anymore. I blocked the number. He showed up at Mom's once when he thought I was at work. She called me after he left and cried for the first time since the table. Not because she wanted me to forgive him. Because she'd remembered the baby he was, the one she held with a colic that shook windows. And she couldn't reconcile him with the man who crawled through his brother's window like a thief who'd been handed a key. I told her I knew both versions were true. We cried on the phone like people who've had practice. Thanksgiving was a battlefield map. Mom asked if I wanted to do separate meals. I said I wouldn't ask her to split herself. She said it was her house and she'd choose who came into it. She chose me. She told Caleb to come on Friday. He didn't. He sent a text that said he needed space. Space from what? Gravity? Affection? Consequence? Mom put his stocking back in the box in December, and when she thought I wasn't looking, she pressed her face into the wool and breathed like it smelled like a decade she could climb into and close. There were days I forgot and then remembered like a car backfiring behind me. And days I remembered from the minute I woke up and somehow found a way to forget for 20 minutes in the hardware aisle comparing screw gauges. There were nights I went to bed and discovered a scent of her on a shirt I hadn't washed yet and had to sit on the floor until the wave passed. There were small mercies I didn't know were possible. The first time I laughed at something dumb on TV and didn't feel guilty. The first time I slept through the night. The first time Moose did that helicopter tail wag and I felt it in my ribs as joy instead of pain disguised as movement. There was a text from Megan 2 months in. You should know Jenna moved out of my place and is staying with Caleb. I stared at it until the words untangled and formed a sentence I was grateful to read, not because I wanted it, but because it aligned the universe with itself. Some problems should be each other's. Word got around. That's what words do. It's their job. I didn't tell more people than necessary. Some people told me to blast them on social media, to humiliate them back. I said, humiliation is cheap and leaves the same taste in your mouth, whether you're giving or receiving. I said the judge would hear enough, and that was the only audience that mattered. I said I didn't want to spend the only life I get narrating the worst thing that happened to me. I wanted to build something else on the land they burned. The last time I saw Jenna was in a conference room with gray carpet and a window that looked out at a parking lot where a kid practiced ollies on a skateboard while his mom scrolled her phone in a minivan. She signed the final papers with a scritch that was somehow smaller than I thought betrayal sounded. She didn't look at me until the very end. When she did, there was a flicker of the girl at the coffee shop who didn't hand out smiles unless you earned them. "I'm sorry," she said. And for the first time, I believed she meant those words. Not because she wanted something, but because there was nothing left to want. "I'm sorry too," I said. And I was. For all of it. For the years we built and the years they stole from inside those years. For the boy I had been who thought loyalty was a guarantee, and for the man who knew better now. After she left, Rivera slid me a folder with copies of everything. "You did this right," she said. "That matters." I nodded. She asked if I wanted a referral for a therapist. I said yes. Doing things right is easier if you don't do them alone. Therapy was a room with a neutral rug and a woman who didn't flinch when I said the words out loud. It was discovering that anger and sorrow are twins who share a closet. It was learning that trusting again isn't a promise you make to another person. It's a promise you make to yourself not to ignore what you know next time. It was unpacking the childhood scripts that made me cover for my brother, the ones that equated love with cleaning up messes. It was forgiving myself for not seeing sooner. It was not forgiving him. It was understanding the difference between those two things. One Saturday in spring, I took down the camera over the side gate. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I didn't want to live like a guard forever. The hole it left looked like a healed piercing. Proof something had hung there long enough to leave a mark, but no longer necessary to hold anything up. I patched it. I painted. I replaced the window screen with one that clicks and locks with a satisfying thunk that belongs to me. Caleb tried one last time, months later, at a family thing I didn't plan to attend, but showed up to because Mom asked me to fix the garage door, and because sometimes you choose inconvenience over principle for the person who taught you both. He walked up to me on the driveway, like we were going to toss a football. He looked thinner. He had the beginnings of a beard, the kind a man grows when he wants to look older than the choices he's made. "Hey," he said, "can we talk?" "No," I said, and kept working the bracket, not unkind, but not pretending. He stood there long enough that I considered handing him a screwdriver just to justify his presence in the physics of the moment. He didn't move. "I messed up," he said, as if the sentence were a currency and not a receipt. I'm happy for you," I said, which made him blink. "You picked who you wanted. You get to live with that pick. That's how grown-ups do it." He frowned, like I'd misread him on purpose. "She and I aren't—" "That is a language I don't speak," I said. "All the ways you want to conjugate aren't to make yourself feel better." I tightened the last bolt. The door slid closed and latched like a period on a sentence. "Please leave." He did. He didn't slam the car door. He didn't peel out. He drove away like a person who finally understood that someone else's boundary is not a challenge. It's a wall. If this were a movie, this is where you'd expect a new love interest, a job promotion, a dog adoption montage. Real life is quieter. There was a job done well that paid for a new water heater and felt almost like triumph. There was a Saturday morning farmer's market where a woman selling honey asked about moose, and we talked for 10 minutes about how bees know where to go. There was a hike where the sky got big enough to make my problem small without making me feel small. There was the first time I didn't check a camera before I fell asleep and woke up anyway. Do I still think about it? Of course I do. The brain isn't a whiteboard. It's a palimpsest. Stories written over stories, old ink shining through in the right light. But the new ink is mine. It says things like, "You did not deserve that," and You are allowed to leave the table when love is no longer being served. And family is not a magic word that absolves a person from learning basic decency. It says, you can be both furious and gentle with yourself at the same time. It says, you didn't lose your life. You lost your illusion. I kept the hoodie, not as a shrine, as a warning. It sits in a box with court papers and a spare Ring camera I might use somewhere that has nothing to do with betrayal. On bad days, I open the box and remind myself I am capable of learning. On good days, I forget where I put the box, and that feels like a kind of miracle. People sometimes ask me what I'd say to someone who suspects what I suspected. Here's my answer. Believe the small voice. Collect facts like you're building a bridge you're going to have to walk across in the rain. Tell the truth to someone who loves you enough to sit with you while the house burns and then help you build a new one with better exits. Don't punch anyone. Call a lawyer. Eat crackers. Pet your dog. Breathe into the stupid paper bag because oxygen is the only thing you can't fix without dying. Write lists. Keep them short. Change the locks. Make the bed. Sleep on one side until you don't. Then move to the middle. And if your brother ever looks at you and says, "We're family," remember that family is an action, not a noun. Then show him what action looks like when it's finally your turn.